Hey guys, I've been wanting to see for a while if it was possible to improvise a sharpening stone with a very low budget and very basic supplies. So my idea was to basically improvise a base on which I could glue a strip of sandpaper and sharpen on it and easily replace the strip once it's worn out or once I want to change grits. So I went to a very famous French store for inexpensive supplies, home supplies, general supplies, even DIY supplies, and I bought what you can see here, these three items. I've got a cutting board, a very basic cutting board, plastic, extremely thin, very thin, but good dimensions and extremely low price. I've got a roll of sandpaper. This wasn't the shittiest one available in the store. It was the second shittiest one, so maybe it will do the job. It's supposed to be 180 grit. And I got a home glue spray, which is usually used for crafting projects and scrapbooking and these kind of things. So all in all, the sandpaper was €3. These two items here, the glue and the cutting board, I kept the receipt for. So the cutting board is 72 cents and the spray, the glue in spray, is €2.59. So all in all these supplies add up to maybe 6-7 euros. 180 grit, so good for reprofiling, assuming the grit lasts a little bit, which it may not, given that this is very cheap sandpaper. This is what we have. At first I thought I wanted to remove this part, which probably wouldn't be used, and then I realized that these could actually be used either to suspend the base or to clamp it down on a workbench, for instance. Given that I do not have rubber feet, I might be able to use this overhang here to clamp it down. So I'm gonna keep it for now. I'm gonna trim this. The idea here is not to make things pretty, just to prevent the material from impeding the gluing process, because I'm going to glue the two halves together. And if you're wondering why I don't use just one half of the cutting board, it's because this cutting board was so cheap that it's barely 4 millimeters thick, so it would be a bit thin. It would be flexible, which wouldn't be a good thing, and it wouldn't allow the knife to overhang from the side of the stone, so the handle material could contact the workbench you're working on while you're sharpening. So the idea is to elevate it a little bit, just a little bit, so that the knife cannot touch the workbench while you're sharpening. By the way, if you're wondering what knife I'm using, this was a scrap knife from a forging project I undertook a few years ago. It came out overly hard, so now I use it as a utility knife. And I'm roughing up the surface in order to allow the epoxy to bind a little bit better on plastic. So I tried to score up the plastic in a crisscross pattern for the micro gouges in the surface to allow the glue to bind them together. Now comes the cleaning and gluing process. So I just remembered I have this brand name specialized plastic glue. I'm gonna use this instead. I think you could use basically anything you have. Even double-sided tape would work in a pinch. We're gonna start with cleaning the surface, of course. This is 90 degrees alcohol. Bamboo picnic knife for spreading the glue. So this glue is kind of like neoprene glue. So you're supposed to spread it relatively evenly on both surfaces and assemble and clamp for supposedly 10 minutes. But given that we're in the start of winter here, I'm gonna allow it maybe half an hour before starting to manipulate the assembly. Okay, so now I'm gonna sand these edges, and these ones especially, in order to make them more or less flush with each other. So let me lay a sheet of paper here so I don't overspray too much. Take your sandpaper, sacrificial sandpaper scissors. So this glue is supposed to be applied and left alone for about 10 minutes, and then you're supposed to press the mating surfaces together. I did not do that because I'm an idiot, and I just sprayed the surfaces, assembled them and clamped them to the end of my workbench for 10 minutes. Should do the job anyway, I think. I'm gonna test it with this knife, which is a Ganzo. It's supposed to be assisted opening, but it broke a few years ago, and now it's just a button lock. So I'm going to try to sharpen this. This is 440C steel. For reference, given that I use this knife as a sacrificial utility knife, I should say that the edge on it is completely flattened, almost totally stripped, because it's a knife usually used for scraping and prying, and so yeah. No edge, almost no edge left at all. I'm using light to medium pressure, trying not to strip the sandpaper or cut into it or tear it, and I'm using it dry. I figure that if it works dry, it should work with higher quality wet and dry sandpaper, so I'm gonna try it like that, minimalistic style. So it's not too bad. We've got a uniform scratch pattern. I'm going to keep going for a couple minutes more. We can see that the sandpaper is loading up really fast. We don't have a burr yet, so I'm going to keep going. I'm in a very awkward position here. Frankly, the sandpaper seems to be wearing really fast. I guess that this higher grit wouldn't load up as quickly as something finer, but it seems not really to be loading up, but to be smoothing out. So I think I'm losing a lot of the abrasive here. Good, the angle is good. I guess you might be able to preserve the abrasives in the paper by only doing pull strokes like that. But this method is slower and potentially less accurate, depending on your skill level, and might also give the impression of sharpness by building a very thin and elongated burr along the edge, which might fool you into thinking that you got your knife sharp, but it's just a very fine burr giving this impression, and it's not really sharp. So I prefer doing alternate strokes like this, push and pull, because it maximizes the effort I put into the sharpening. There's an interesting effect of the wearing away of the paper. It seems to go to a finer grit as you're sharpening, so it's kind of like a progressive sharpening stone grit, if you know what I mean. So it starts very coarse, and at the same time that you don't need coarse grit anymore, it goes to finer grit. It's quite interesting. This feels like a maybe 240 to 400 grit sandpaper now. These sections here that I did not use are still 180 grit, of course, but this section is quite finer. So I expect a slower acting abrasive, but finer result. The downside, of course, would be that if you start on another blade after this one, you would of course start with a higher grit, and you would be forced to do so, unless you want to change the paper each time you sharpen something. So maybe you could stack up your sharpening process, going for a coarser, toothier edge on some tools first, and then making full use of the strip of paper with finer edge tools, or maybe tools that don't really need reprofiling or repairing, just a slight bit of maintenance on the edge. So it's not too bad. It's a slightly convex edge, and the edge looks quite clean. It feels a bit toothy, especially down here, but it looks very clean. It's maybe a 400 to 600 grit scratch pattern from experience. So not too bad, not too bad. I'm gonna strap it. Oh, and as you can see, I actually tore up these two corners by slightly over tilting the blade, so I dug into the paper. It's not too much of a problem given the price of this paper, but if you intended to sharpen multiple tools with the same strip of sandpaper, it might become an issue, and you might want to be a bit more careful than I was, not to tear the paper. So let's go for the strap, and then I'll be back to you for the sharpness test. The blade has been strapped and cleaned. It was a two-stage strapping process. I was using very coarse compound and then the finest I had. Okay. Not too bad. Yeah, far from perfect, but really not too bad given the sharpening equipment we made use of. The belly is quite sharp. Of course, this paper is slightly damp, so it doesn't help. But yeah, the belly seems to work. Yeah, I'm not disappointed given the supplies we made use of. Pretty good. Yeah, not too bad. Slight bit of coarseness in the edge right here. This is the part I spent the least amount of effort on, so it was to be expected. Let's see if it shaves. So yeah, it does shave. It's a very rough shave. I have to push quite a bit. But it does shave. Nice bold spot on the arm now. So yeah, we got a shaving edge on this 440C Ganzo using a plastic cutting board, 72 cents plastic cutting board, a strip of dollar store sandpaper, 180 grit, and a completely stripped away edge, and we managed to restore it to a almost shaving sharp state in maybe 10 minutes max. Let's see how easy it is to strip and change the paper strips. Okay, so it comes off. Okay, so very easy to strip away, and given that this glue is contact adhesive, I guess that I might be able to just take a new strip of sandpaper, spray it again, wait for it to cure, and just press it to this surface, and it should mate quite effectively. So I would say that this experiment is a success. I'm definitely going to keep using this setup. Subscribe, because I will definitely be following up on this system right here. Please like and share, it would mean the world to me.